Is Chainsaw Man actually better than Dandadan? If you're a fan of both series, then you probably assume everyone likes Chainsaw Man more. But in terms of popularity, Dandadan is right up there with Chainsaw Man. While Chainsaw Man has been growing steadily over the last few years, Dandadan saw a huge growth in popularity following the anime, and there's more people reading the manga than ever. So while Dandadan may have had a slower start, now the two series are basically in the same tier of popularity. Which raises the question, what is it about Dandadan that's helped it consistently grow, while Chainsaw Man has been more of a roller coaster? In this video, I'm going to answer that question by looking at how these manga have grown since their debuts, discussing the strengths of both series, and explaining what it is that Dandadan does better than Chainsaw Man. Now, before we get into the stories and the writing, let's look at the numbers, because when we bring up Dandadan versus Chainsaw Man, a lot of people are going to respond in the comments and say, bro, how can you compare them? Chainsaw Man started before Dandadan. Tatsu worked for Fujimoto. Chainsaw Man has more sales. I'm a person on the internet and I looked this up, so obviously I know everything. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's a lot closer than you would assume. Chainsaw Man started in December of 2018. Dandadan wouldn't start until April of 2021. So Chainsaw Man had a 3-year start. But if you recall, Chainsaw Man went on a break for 7 months after part 1. Because of that, Dandadan caught up to Chainsaw Man in terms of length. And now Dandadan is only behind by about 8 chapters. Of course, now it's on break for like a month, but you get what I mean. The two series are basically the same length, so the whole Chainsaw Man started before Dandadan thing is practically irrelevant at this point. So then you might say, okay, well, Chainsaw Man is still more popular. And let's talk about that, because Chainsaw Man might have more copies, but the actual popularity isn't that far off. So Chainsaw Man has something like 30 million copies in circulation. And yes, I know that's not sales, but just stay with me. After the Chainsaw Man anime, they didn't really print a lot more volumes, and there were no reports of any big increase in sales. On the other hand, they doubled the copies for Dandadan around the anime, going from 4 million copies to 8 million. So again, this isn't a sales metric, but it's kind of crazy to double the amount of units for a series. Chainsaw Man did have the head start, but looking at the long term, Dandadan could reach a point in a few years where its growth is just as big as Chainsaw Man's. It certainly looks that way when you look at the online popularity for these manga, because they're both in the top 5 manga for Shueisha. But real quick, just before we get into that, make sure to become a channel member if you're enjoying this video. You get exclusive perks like custom emojis and badges, and you get to pick which series I talk about next. But, like I was saying, if we look at Manga Plus, which is the official source for Shueisha besides Viz, Chainsaw Man is currently at number 1 at the time I'm recording this video, but Dandadan is at number 4. Now, I'm not sure exactly how they calculate the scores. I know they basically do it by counting engagement, but I don't know if this changes every year or if it's the total sum for the entire series. Regardless, Chainsaw Man is ahead of Dandadan by just about 100,000 points. So just by looking at this page, you could come out and be like, well see, Chainsaw Man is objectively ahead. And while that is true to an extent, the devil is in the details. If you look at the recent chapters for both series, Chainsaw Man gets more likes in its comments, but they each get the same amount of comments, averaging around 500 comments. And when you look at the Viz website, the other official source, Dandadan and Chainsaw Man are both at the top of the trending list, with Dandadan actually ahead depending on which week you look. So I've gone on and on about the numbers, but here's what I'm getting at. It's easy to assume that Chainsaw Man is way more popular than Dandadan, but when you look at everything we've talked about, the numbers clearly indicate that while Chainsaw Man is still growing at a steady pace, Dandadan has seen exponential growth to the point where it is now on par with Chainsaw Man and could very well surpass it in the next few years. But of course, the next logical question would be, how did this happen? How is it that Chainsaw Man started first, but now Dandadan is in the same tier? Well, as someone who has been reading Chainsaw Man every week for the last 3 years, and has been reading Dandadan every week for the last 150 chapters, I can confidently tell you exactly what it is that people like more about Dandadan. Actually, it's two things. And the first of those things is the characters. If you put a gun to my head and said which one is better, Chainsaw Man Volume 1 or Dandadan Volume 1, I would pick Chainsaw Man 9 times out of 10. Chainsaw Man undoubtedly has the better start because it starts out with Denji ripping zombies apart, eating noodles with Makima, kicking Aki in the nuts, and it's got the introduction of power. Dandadan has a great start as well, but while everyone loves the characters and the romance, the whole plot of the first volume can be summed up with the question, got balls? As a matter of fact, for the first couple of years, you'd often see people criticize Dandadan and say that it has no plot and it's just about Okarun's balls. Meanwhile, Chainsaw Man starts off strong and just boom, never stops. But it wasn't very long before you saw new fans bring up the same complaint, namely the characters. If you followed the anime, then you know that a lot of people complained that Chainsaw Man introduces a lot of characters like Himeno that die almost right away. In fact, I actually talked about this in a video where I said Jujutsu Kaisen handles character deaths better than Chainsaw Man. Obviously that video aged well because Jujutsu Kaisen has never had issues with that. But my point is that while the plot of Chainsaw Man, especially in part 1, is really good, it's not uncommon to hear people say they wish Fujimoto would flesh out more of the characters. Yet when you look at Dandadan, it has the exact opposite problem. The plot isn't as strong in the beginning, but the trade-off is that Tatsu introduces amazing characters, and takes the time to flesh each of them out and build some of the best character chemistry I've ever seen in any manga. I talk about this in just about every one of my Dandadan videos, and I will continue to do so because Dandadan really does have the best cast of characters. Obviously, you have the chemistry between Okarun and Momo that only sparked a bajillion Dandadan as a romance videos. You have Seiko, everyone's new favorite granny, except for Turbo Granny, everyone's new favorite mascot. Then we meet Ira, who is slightly annoying, but has an emotional introduction and quickly becomes the big sister of the group. Then we meet Gigi, the chill goof that's friends with Momo and becomes Okarun's first guy friend. And the list goes on with Kinta, Vamola, Unji, Koki, the class president, Queen Sensei. Dandadan may have had a slow start, but during that start it builds one of the best casts in any ongoing manga. And in the time that Dandadan caught up to Chainsaw Man, the plot has caught up as well. Cause see, with part 2, everyone that was complaining about part 1 generally agreed that Fujimoto was doing a better job in part 2. We got the introduction of Asa and Yoru, 2 characters that Fujimoto has continuously fleshed out with every new chapter. Asa is the perfect contrast to Denji, and Yoru has become a nuanced character with her own flaws. You also have characters like Yuko that made a relatively short appearance, but was a well-rounded character, and Fami, a character that has remained a mystery for almost 100 chapters, and continues to surprise readers every time she appears. But while Fujimoto improved the character writing in Chainsaw Man, the plot has run into some issues. Part 2 starts off really strong. You get Asa and the War Devil, and they fight the Justice Devil, and then Asa dates Denji. But right after the Falling Devil, Chainsaw Man kinda loses people. Fans start to question what the heck is going on in the story as Asa is put on the sideline for a bit, and there's really no clear end game. Granted, the stories felt much better over the last year or so, and the current arc is actually really good, but there was a solid year or so where a lot of people took a break from the manga or simply dropped it. Meanwhile, ask any Dandadan fan, and 10 times out of 10, they will tell you that Dandadan continues continues to get better and better. This summer we'll get the Evil Eye arc in the anime, which is insane. After that we get the Kaiju arc where we see all the cool nanoskin transformations and the introduction of Vamola. Then we get the Space Globalists arc where they have to fight against a giant alien army, and we get Vamola's intense backstory. Then we get the Danmanra arc where they get sent into a board game and have to fight against an army of fantasy monsters. And now we're finally up against what seems to be the final boss, who apparently may have orchestrated the entire story of Dandadan. Each arc just gets better and better. Each arc is increasingly intense. The stakes just get higher and higher, and the foreshadowing is crazy. It's to the point where this current arc and the arc following it are like the Avengers Endgame of Dandadan. There's a ton of buildup that's going to lead to an insane level of payoff. All while the characters have just been getting better and better, and we keep getting even more great characters. So here's what I'm getting at. As someone who follows both series, I do enjoy both of them, but while Chainsaw Man has seen some peaks and valleys over the last couple of years, I have never for a second felt like Dandadan has ever dropped. The fanbase may not be as loud, but the turnout for Dandadan chapters has been consistently growing for years now, and it's clearly because Dandadan has better characters, and the story has consistently gotten better while Chainsaw Man's took a dip for a while. So, sure, Chainsaw Man started first and on the surface is more popular, but Dandadan is just as popular on Viz and Manga Plus. It gets just as many views. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years, Dandadan was actually more popular. That is because, as much as I love Chainsaw Man, Dandadan has one of the all-time best casts of characters, and it is building up to be one of the all-time best manga. But now I'd like to hear what you think. How would you compare Chainsaw Man and Dandadan? What are your predictions for the future of each series? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. Also, make sure to become a Shonen OG channel member. You get exclusive perks, you get to pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also, make sure to check out my other Dandadan videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.